Preston Gaines didn't knock. He never knocked. He pushed the door open with one hand, let it swing wide, and walked straight to the counter like the floor belonged to him, because in his mind, it did. He looked at Diana Cole the way people look at furniture they're thinking of throwing out. Slowly, without apology. "Still here?" he said, setting his leather portfolio on her clean counter. "I keep expecting to drive by one morning and find this place dark. Would honestly be a mercy." Diana said nothing. She kept folding. Preston reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, and held it between two fingers, dangling it, the way you'd offer a treat to something small. He let it drop onto the counter. "Tip," he said, "for the ambiance." A woman sitting by the dryers looked down at her phone. A teenage boy near the window pretended not to hear. Preston leaned forward, voice dropping just low enough to feel private, just loud enough to make sure the room caught every word. "You know what I tell my guys when they ask why I haven't cleared this block yet? I say, let the black woman keep her little dream a little longer. It's more fun to watch it fall apart on its own." He smiled, straightened his cufflinks, picked up his portfolio. 60 days, Diana. Start thinking about what's next for you." The door swung shut. The machines kept running. Nobody in that laundromat moved for a full 3 seconds. Diana Cole stood behind the counter, both hands flat on the glass, eyes forward, face unreadable. 3 months later, that same man would be standing in a courthouse hallway, portfolio gone, composure gone, hands shaking at his sides, while Diana walked past him without a single glance. What happened between that moment and that courthouse? It started the night before Preston ever dropped that lease, on a dark stretch of Route 7, with a flat tire, and an old man sitting alone in the cold. Stay with me. This story will remind you that quiet dignity outlasts loud cruelty every single time. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories like this one matter to you, subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Harwick, Georgia was the kind of town that looked fine from the highway. Clean storefronts, a water tower with the town seal painted on the side, a main street wide enough that you could almost convince yourself things were good here, that people were doing all right, that the distance between one side of town and the other was just geography. But if you turned off the highway and drove 6 blocks east, past the auto shop, past the check cashing place, past the church with the hand-painted sign out front, you'd end up on Dunbar Street. And Dunbar Street told a different story. It was a working street, honest, worn, alive in the way that only places without much money managed to be alive, with noise and color and people who knew each other's names. Miss Patrice ran a hair salon out of the bottom floor of a building that leaned slightly to the left. Ray operated an alteration shop where the door stuck in humid weather, and he kept a box fan running from April through October. There was a Caribbean restaurant, a pawn shop, a small grocery that doubled as a community bulletin board, its front window covered in handwritten flyers for babysitters and church suppers and missing dogs. And at the corner of Dunbar and 4th, wedged between a vacant lot and Ray's alterations shop, sat Cole's Wash and Fold. The sign had been there for 22 years. Diana's mother, Carolyn Cole, had painted it herself. White letters on a blue background, slightly uneven. The ampersand a little too large. Diana had never changed it. She told people it was for sentimental reasons, which was true. But it was also because she didn't have the budget for a new sign, and she figured honesty about that was its own kind of dignity. Diana Cole was 34 years old. She had her mother's hands, wide palms, strong fingers, the kind of hands that knew how to work. and her father's way of going quiet when things got hard. She was not a small woman, but she moved carefully, economically, the way people move when they've learned that wasted energy is a luxury they can't afford. She wore her hair pulled back on work days. She kept her nails short. She owned 3 pairs of work shoes and rotated them on a schedule so none of them wore out too fast. Her husband, Marcus, had died 3 years ago. Kidney disease, caught late, treated inadequately. The medical bills had taken 14 months to settle. Diana had paid every one of them. She didn't talk about that period often. When she did, she described it simply. We did what we had to do. She had Damon. He was 16, long-legged, and quiet, in the way that intelligent teenagers are quiet. Always watching. Always processing. Saying less than he understood. He got up every morning without being asked. Made his own breakfast. Walked to school, came straight home. He did his homework at the folding table in the back of the laundromat when Diana worked late, which was most nights. He had applied for a local scholarship 8 months ago, the kind that could cover 2 full years of college, and had been waiting on the results with a patience that was almost painful to witness. The laundromat itself was modest but immaculate. Diana opened at 6:30 every morning and closed at 8 every evening. She had 7 front-loading washers, 5 dryers, and 1 industrial dryer in the back that had been making a grinding noise for 4 months and needed a part she hadn't yet been able to afford. She offered wash and fold service, alterations referrals to Ray next door, and quiet, which in a neighborhood like Dunbar Street was worth more than people realized. Mothers came in with strollers. Elderly men sat in the plastic chairs and read the paper. Kids did homework in the corner. Diana kept a basket of individually wrapped candies on the counter and never once made anyone feel rushed. She was, in the language of Harwick, Georgia, a fixture. The kind of person a neighborhood quietly depends on without ever fully saying so. What Dunbar Street did not know, what Diana had told almost no one, was how close the margins were. Rent had been $1,400 a month when she took over the lease from her mother's estate. It was now $2,650. Preston Gaines had raised it 3 times in 2 years, each increase arriving in a plain envelope with 30 days' notice and no explanation beyond market adjustment. Diana had absorbed each one. She'd cut her own salary. She'd deferred the industrial dryer repair. She'd stopped replacing the plastic chairs when they cracked and started patching them with electrical tape instead. She had never missed a payment. Not once. She told herself that mattered. She told herself that a perfect payment record meant something. That consistency was a form of argument. She was beginning to understand that Preston Gaines did not find her argument compelling. On weekday evenings after closing, Diana drove home on Route 7, a 2-lane road that cut through the eastern edge of Harwick and out toward the rural stretch where supply warehouses and equipment dealers sat back from the road behind gravel lots. It was not a scenic drive, but it was quiet, and after 12 hours on her feet, quiet was what she needed. On the Tuesday that changed everything, she had stayed late to receive a supply delivery. Detergent, dryer sheets, coin rolls, that hadn't arrived until nearly 8:45. She loaded the boxes herself, locked up, and pulled out onto Route 7 at 9:07. The road was dark. The kind of dark that feels total. No streetlights, no businesses, just tree line and asphalt, and the tunnel of her own headlights. She almost missed the hazard lights entirely. They were faint at first, orange pulses through the tree line, barely visible until she came around the long curve near mile marker 12. A car pulled hard onto the gravel shoulder. A Lincoln Town Car, dark blue, one rear tire completely flat. And beside it, standing very still in the beam of his own taillights, a small, elderly man in a tan overcoat. He wasn't waving. He wasn't on his phone. He was just standing there, both hands at his sides, looking out at the empty road, as if he had already accepted that no one was going to stop. Diana slowed. She pulled over. She put the car in park and left her hazards running. The old man turned when he heard her door open. Even in the low light, she could see the relief move across his face. Immediate, unguarded. The kind of relief that only comes after a long wait. "Oh, thank God," he said. His voice was thin but steady. "I was beginning to think I'd be out here all night." Diana walked toward him, reading the situation quickly. Flat rear left tire. The spare was likely in the trunk. Lincoln Town Cars carried them underneath the cargo floor. The car was a 2019 model, dark blue, immaculate except for a thin film of road dust. The hazard lights were blinking steadily, the engine off. The old man was standing slightly off balance, his right hand resting on the rear panel of the car for support. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. He thought about it. "Since about 7:30, maybe 7:45. It was past 9 now, over an hour, alone, on a road with almost no traffic. "Do you have a spare?" she asked. "I believe so. Yes, I think there's one in the back. I tried to get to it, but I couldn't quite manage the—" He gestured vaguely at the trunk, embarrassed. "My hands aren't what they used to be." Diana nodded. "I'll take care of it. Why don't you sit in my car? It's warmer." He hesitated. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not," she said simply. She guided him to the passenger seat of her Civic, got him settled, and turned the heat up. Then she went back to the Lincoln. She opened the trunk and found the spare exactly where it should be, beneath the cargo floor, secured with a wing nut that had seized slightly from age. She worked it loose with both hands, lifted the spare out, leaned it against the bumper. She found the jack and the lug wrench in the compartment alongside. The night was cool. She could see her breath. Here is where a careful viewer would notice something. The Lincoln's hazard lights were blinking at full strength. The taillights were active. The rear of the car was bathed in a warm amber glow, more than enough light to work by. Diana, out of pure habit, pulled out her phone and wedged it in the door jamb with the flashlight on, angled toward the flat tire. She didn't need it. She just always worked with light when she could. She crouched down, fitted the wrench to the first lug nut, and began. The old man watched her through the windshield of her Civic. After a few minutes, she heard the passenger door open. "You really don't have to." "I know," she said without looking up. "I want to." He stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching her work. She could feel him searching for something to say. "My name is Walter," he offered. "Walter Gaines." "Diana," she said. "Diana Cole. Do you live nearby, Diana?" "Harwick, about 12 miles back." "Harwick." He said it quietly, like he was turning something over. "I know Harwick. I used to know it quite well." She pulled the flat tire free and set it aside. "Used to. I haven't been back in some time," he said. There was something in his voice, not quite regret, but adjacent to it. "Things change. You get busy. You tell yourself you'll go back, and then—" He stopped. "Well, time passes." Diana fitted the spare to the bolts and began threading the lug nuts by hand. "You have family in Harwick?" A pause. "My son handles most of our interests there." She noticed he didn't say yes. She noticed he didn't say no. She tightened the lug nuts in a star pattern. The right way. The way her father had taught her when she was 14 in the driveway of their house on Clement Street. She used the wrench to torque them down firm. She lowered the jack slowly, checked the tire's contact with the ground, then went around once more to make sure everything was seated. "You've done this before," Walter said. It wasn't a question. "A few times," she said. She stood up, wiped her hands on the small rag she kept in her glove box, and looked the repair over. Solid. Safe. Good enough to get him home. "You should have that looked at in the morning," she said. "The spare's fine, but it's not meant for distance." Walter nodded. He was looking at her in a way she couldn't quite read. Attentive, almost careful, like someone memorizing something. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Home," she said. "Damon's waiting up." "Your son?" "My son." Walter reached into his coat. "Then please, let me—" "No," Diana said, gently but completely. "That's not why I stopped." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were pale blue and very clear, and in them Diana saw something she hadn't expected to find on the side of a dark road. Something like recognition. Like he was seeing something in her that he had almost forgotten existed. "My son will wonder where I am," he said finally. "Let me follow you to the gate," Diana said. "Just to make sure you make it." He didn't argue. 12 minutes later, she watched the Lincoln pass through a pair of iron gates at the end of a long private drive. The property behind those gates was large. She could see lights in several windows, a stone facade, mature oaks lining the approach. She sat at the entrance for a moment, then she turned around and drove home. She didn't think much of it. She should have looked more carefully at the name on the gatepost. It said, Gaines. Diana opened the laundromat at 6:30 the next morning, same as always. She measured detergent into the supply shelf, counted the coin drawer, turned on the machines in sequence from left to right. The industrial dryer in the back made its grinding sound, lower and rougher than last week, she noticed, and she added it to the list she kept in her head, the list of things that needed fixing and couldn't yet be fixed. By 7:15, the first customers were in. By 8, every washer had a load running. It was a Wednesday, which meant the elderly regulars, Mr. Beaumont, the Okafor sisters, a quiet man named Gerald who always brought his own detergent in a repurposed juice bottle, would trickle in between 9 and 11. Diana liked Wednesdays. The rhythm was predictable. Predictable was good. She was refolding a stack of fitted sheets when she noticed the car. Black SUV, parked directly across the street, facing the laundromat. Engine off. Windows tinted dark enough that she couldn't see inside. It had been there when she arrived. She'd registered it peripherally, but thought nothing of it. A delivery vehicle, maybe. Someone visiting one of the other businesses. But by 10 o'clock it still hadn't moved. Diana watched it between tasks. Loading a cart, checking a dryer, running a card for Mrs. Okafor's wash and fold. Each time she glanced up, the SUV was in the same position. Still, quiet, present. She told herself it was nothing. At 11:17, Preston Gaines walked in. He was dressed for a meeting. Charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and moved through the laundromat with the ease of someone who has never once felt out of place anywhere. He set the portfolio on Diana's counter, unzipped it, and removed a single document held together with a binder clip. He placed it in front of her. "New lease terms," he said. "Effective 60 days from today." Diana looked at the number on the first line without touching the paper. $3,050 a month. An increase of $400. On top of the increase from 8 months ago. On top of the one before that. "The market's the market, Diana," Preston said. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking around the laundromat, at the patched plastic chairs, the hand-lettered price list. the flickering light above the folding table that she'd been meaning to replace for 6 weeks. Nothing personal. His eyes landed on the industrial dryer in the back. He looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then he looked at Diana, and one corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more deliberate than that. He picked up his portfolio, and then he did something Diana had not expected. He took out his phone and made a call, right there at the counter. 3 words into it, she understood. "Yeah, I'm at the Dunbar property now. Send Kowalski over." He hung up, looked at Diana pleasantly. Building inspection, routine, should only take about 20 minutes. He walked to one of the plastic chairs, sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and began scrolling his phone. 23 minutes later, a man named Kowalski arrived with a clipboard. He did not introduce himself to Diana. He walked past her directly, nodding once at Preston, and began moving through the laundromat with the methodical attention of someone who has been told exactly what to find. He crouched beside the baseboard near the back wall. He ran a finger along the window frame above the second washer. He spent a full 90 seconds in front of the industrial dryer, writing something down. When he was finished, he brought the clipboard to Diana. 11 items. Hairline crack in the northeast corner baseboard. Dripping utility faucet. Industrial unit presenting noise indicative of mechanical failure. 2 ceiling tiles with water staining. Extension cord in violation of commercial code. Gap in door weather stripping. Missing GFCI outlet cover plate in the utility room. Peeling paint on interior wall exceeding 4 square feet. 3 items Diana couldn't even locate as she read them. All violations require remediation within 30 days, Kowalski said. Non-compliance results in formal citation and potential operational suspension. He left without waiting for her response. Preston stood, smoothed his jacket, and picked up his portfolio. "Probably want to get on top of that," he said. 30 days goes fast. He walked out. The door swung shut. The laundromat was completely silent. Mrs. Okafor, who had been sitting quietly with her laundry bag on her lap, looked up at Diana. Her eyes were soft and old, and full of something that Diana didn't want to receive right now. "Baby," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry." Diana looked down at the 11-item list. She read it once, twice. She did the math she didn't want to do. New rent, violation remediation costs, the dryer repair that could no longer wait, and the number she arrived at was not a number she could reach. She set the paper on the counter face down. Keisha came by at noon. Diana showed her the lease and the violation list without saying much. Keisha read both, set them down, and said what Keisha always said when she was angry. Nothing, for a long moment, and then everything. He walked in and called an inspector while he was standing in your building. Diana. He called them while he was standing right there. "I know. That's not a landlord. That's a..." Keisha stopped herself. "Where's Damon?" "School." Keisha looked toward the back room, then back at Diana. "Does he know?" Not yet. What Diana didn't know was that Damon already knew something was wrong. Not from the lease, not from the violations, but from something he'd overheard 2 days earlier in the school hallway. Something about a scholarship, something about a list, something that had made him go very quiet on the walk home and say nothing at dinner and sit at the folding table longer than usual, pretending to study. But that would come later. Right now, Diana looked out the window. The black SUV was still parked across the street. It still hadn't moved. At 4:17 that afternoon, Diana walked out of the laundromat. Not because she was done. She was never done at 4:17. She walked out because the SUV was still there, and she had decided somewhere between refolding towels and ringing up Gerald's coin order that she was not the kind of woman who waited for things to come to her. She crossed the street without hurrying. She knocked on the driver's side window twice, firm, unhesitant, the way she knocked on the back door of a supplier who was running late. The window came down. The man inside was somewhere in his late 50s, silver-haired, dressed in a dark suit that fit him the way expensive suits fit men who wear them every day. His face was composed, not surprised, not uncomfortable. He looked like a man who had been expecting this moment and had decided in advance how he would handle it. "Miss Cole," he said. Diana went still for just a moment. He knew her name. He had been waiting. "Who are you?" she said. "My name is Arthur Langley. I represent the Gaines family." He paused. "May I step out? I think this conversation would be better had outside the car." She stepped back. He got out. He was tall, unhurried, and he kept his hands visible. A small gesture she noticed and filed away. "I'm sorry for the manner of this approach," Langley said. "We weren't certain of the right time." "The right time for what?" Langley looked at her steadily. "Walter Gaines passed away this morning. Heart failure. In his sleep." He let that land before continuing. "In his final hours, he asked his night nurse to find the woman who helped him on Route 7 Tuesday evening. That was you." Diana heard the words. She understood them. But for a moment they didn't connect to anything. Walter, the thin man in the tan overcoat, the way he'd stood at the side of the road, looking out at the empty road, like he'd already given up. Gone. Just like that. "I'm sorry," she said. And she meant it. "The family is aware of what you did," Langley continued. "You stopped. You changed the tire yourself. You followed him home to make sure he arrived safely. You refused any payment." He folded his hands in front of him. "The Gaines family would like to express their gratitude in a meaningful way. A monetary gesture. Significant." Diana looked at him. "How significant?" Diana looked at him. "How?" "That's a conversation for a proper meeting. But I can tell you the family takes this seriously." Diana was quiet for the moment. Around them, Dunbar Street moved at its afternoon pace. A delivery truck double-parked outside the grocery. 2 kids on bikes weaving around it. The smell of something frying from the Caribbean restaurant 2 doors down. "Does his son know you're here?" she asked. Langley paused. Half a second, barely perceptible. But Diana had spent 16 years reading customers who were about to tell her something wasn't their fault. She knew what a half-second pause meant. "Mr. Preston Gaines is aware of his father's wishes," Langley said. "Not the same thing." Diana heard the difference immediately. "I'll need some time," she said. "Of course." Langley reached into his jacket and produced a card. Plain, cream-colored, just a name and a number. "Whenever you're ready." Diana took the card. She watched him get back into the SUV. She stood on the sidewalk until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared. Then she went back inside, locked the front door 40 minutes early, and sat down at the counter. She put the card next to the violation list. She put the violation list next to the new lease. She looked at all 3 pieces of paper together for a long time. And then something clicked. The kind of click that happens not in the mind, but somewhere lower and slower. The kind of understanding that arrives fully formed once it decides to arrive. Preston Gaines, her landlord. The man who had walked into her laundromat that morning, dropped a $400 rent increase on her counter, called a building inspector while standing in her presence, and watched with a thin smile as 11 violations were recorded against her business. Preston Gaines. Walter Gaines. The same name on the lease she'd been signing for 2 years. The same name on the gate at the end of that long Rivatu drive on Route 7. The same name Langley had just spoken with that careful, diplomatic distance. Mr. Preston Gaines is aware of his father's wishes. The man trying to drive her out of her building was the son of the man she had helped. Diana sat with that for a long time. She thought about Walter standing beside that car. The way he'd said, "My son handles most of our interests there." Not warmly, not proudly, just flatly, like a fact he had long since stopped arguing with. The way he'd looked at her when she refused the money, that expression she hadn't been able to name at the time. She could name it now. He'd looked ashamed, not of her, of something else entirely. Diana picked up her phone. She called Keisha first. "Can you come over tonight? Bring Aunt Vera. I need to think out loud." Then she sat in the quiet of her laundromat. Machines finally still. The street outside going gold in the late afternoon light. And she thought about what it meant that the reward being offered to her with one hand was being offered by a family whose other hand was currently holding an eviction clock over her head. She thought about Damon at that folding table, doing homework, waiting for news about a scholarship. She thought about her mother's handwriting on the sign outside. She picked up the violation list and read it again from the top. 30 days. Keisha arrived at 7 with a foil-covered plate of food because that was what Keisha did in a crisis. She fed people first and asked questions second. Aunt Vera arrived at 7:15 with nothing but her reading glasses and her handbag and the specific quality of attention that only came with 71 years of watching people make mistakes. They sat at Diana's kitchen table, the three of them, plus Damon, who had come out of his room when he heard Aunt Vera's voice and pulled up a chair without being asked. Diana laid everything out. The lease, the violations, Langley's visit, Walter's death, the connection to Preston. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Keisha spoke first. "He called the inspector while he was standing in your building," she said. She had said this before, at noon, but she said it again now because some things needed to be said more than once to be fully believed. He stood there and made the call and then waited for the man to arrive. "In your building, while you were working." "I know," Diana said. "That's not a business decision," Keisha said. "That's a message." Aunt Vera, who had been reading through the violation list with her glasses pushed up to the bridge of her nose, set it down. 11 items, she said. "In a building he's owned for how long?" "The Gaines family has owned that block since at least 2009, Diana said. My mother signed her first lease with them in 2003. So for 20 years, nothing, and now 11 violations in one visit." Aunt Vera removed her glasses. "Baby, this isn't about the building." "I know what it's about," Diana said. "Then let's talk about the other thing." Aunt Vera looked at her directly. "This reward." Diana nodded. "When someone offers you the world with one hand," Aunt Vera said, "you look at the other hand. Every time, without exception." Keisha pulled out her phone. She had spent the afternoon searching, and now she turned the screen toward the table. Gaines Property Group, parent company of the entity that holds your lease. They've been quietly acquiring properties on Dunbar Street for 3 years. 7 buildings in total. She scrolled. There's a county development proposal, mixed-use luxury residential and retail, filed 8 months ago. The proposed footprint covers the entire east side of Dunbar between 3rd and 6th. Diana didn't move. "Your building," Keisha said quietly, "sits at the corner of 4th. The table was silent. Damon, who had been listening without speaking, leaned forward and looked at his mother. "So the reward is a buyout," he said. "They want you to take the money and leave quietly." He was 16 years old, and he had understood it faster than anyone. "That's what I think," Diana said. "Then don't take it," Damon said, simply, finally, like it wasn't even a question. Diana looked at her son for a moment. Then she nodded. The next morning, she called Langley and requested a meeting. She went in clear-eyed and composed and asked her question directly, across a conference table in an office that smelled like leather and recycled air. "Is the reward contingent on me vacating my lease?" Langley looked at her. He took exactly 2 seconds too long to answer. "The family's primary concern is expressing gratitude." "That's not what I asked," Diana said. Another pause. "There may be future conversations about the property that—" Diana stood up. She picked up her bag. "Then we don't have anything to talk about." She walked out. She was in her car, key in the ignition, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered because she had learned in the past 48 hours that unknown numbers sometimes mattered. The voice was elderly, female, careful. "Ms. Cole? My name is Evelyn Gaines. I'm Walter's wife." A pause. "I need to speak with you. Alone. Please don't tell Preston." Diana sat with the phone against her ear, and the engine not yet running, and the parking garage dim and quiet around her. "When?" she said. "Tomorrow morning. There's a diner on Route 9 called Patsy's. Do you know it?" "I know it." 9 o'clock. I'll be in the back booth." The line went quiet. Diana sat for another moment. Then she started the car. She drove back to Dunbar Street on autopilot, parked in her usual spot, unlocked the laundromat, and began the opening sequence. Coin drawer, detergent shelf, machines left to right, while her mind ran on a separate track entirely. She was measuring out the third detergent caddy when her phone buzzed. A number she recognized this time. Damon's school. She answered. The voice on the other end was the assistant principal, a woman named Mrs. Farrow, who Diana had always found decent, if bureaucratic. Mrs. Farrow sounded uncomfortable in the particular way of someone delivering news they did not generate but must convey. "Ms. Cole, I'm calling regarding the Harwick Community Scholarship. Damon's application has been removed from consideration due to an administrative discrepancy in the submission documentation." Diana's hand tightened on the phone. "What discrepancy?" I'm not able to speak to the specifics. The decision came from the foundation board." "The Gaines Family Foundation," Diana said. A silence. "Yes." "Mrs. Farrow, my son has been working on that application for 8 months." "I know, Ms. Cole. I'm very sorry. The woman stopped. Diana could hear her choosing between what she was supposed to say and what she actually wanted to say. "I'm very sorry," she said again, and hung up. Diana set the phone down on the folding counter. She thought about Damon on the front step the day before, backpack still on, looking at his phone, saying nothing when she pulled up. He had already known. He had sat through dinner and homework and the kitchen table meeting, and he had already known, and he had not said a word because he did not want to add his weight to hers. Diana pressed both hands flat on the folding counter and looked at the wall in front of her. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were dry. When the first customer walked in at 7:03, Diana was behind the counter, measured and ready, and nothing in her face gave away a single thing. Patsy's Diner on Route 9 was the kind of place that had been there so long it had stopped trying to look like anything other than what it was. Vinyl booths the color of old mustard, a laminated menu with photographs, a counter that ran the full length of the room with round stools bolted to the floor. It smelled like coffee and bacon grease and something sweet from the pie case near the register. Diana arrived at 8:55. Evelyn Gaines was already in the back booth. She was smaller than Diana had expected, a compact, white-haired woman in a pale blue cardigan, both hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked up when Diana approached, and her eyes were alert and clear and very tired in the way of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally decided to set it down. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn said. Diana slid into the booth across from her. A waitress appeared, poured coffee, disappeared. Neither woman touched their cup immediately. "I'll be direct," Evelyn said. "Walter changed his will 2 weeks before he died, quietly, with a private attorney, not the family firm. Preston doesn't know the full contents yet. He will, once probate begins. But I wanted to speak with you before that happens." Diana listened. "Walter had been troubled for some time," Evelyn continued. "Not in his mind. His mind was clear, whatever Preston has been telling people. Troubled in his conscience." She looked down at her coffee. "He built a great deal in this county, but he also looked away from a great deal. The way Dunbar Street has been managed in recent years, the displacement, the rent pressure, the way tenants have been treated, he knew. He didn't stop it. That weighed on him." "Why are you telling me this?" Diana asked. Evelyn reached into the cardigan pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. She set it on the table between them and smoothed it flat with one hand. It was a letter, handwritten in a slow and careful script that spoke of someone who had taken their time. Dated 11 days ago. Diana read it. "If something happens to me before this is settled, find the woman on Route 7. She'll know what honest looks like. She'll know what this was supposed to be for." She read it twice. She set it down. "He didn't know he was going to die," Evelyn said. "But he was 81 and he'd had 2 cardiac events in the past 3 years, and I think some part of him understood that time was not guaranteed. The night his car broke down, he was coming back from a meeting with the private attorney. He'd been finalizing the trust documents." "What trust?" Diana said. "The Gaines Community Preservation Fund." Evelyn spoke the name carefully, as if she had practiced it. $4.2 million, designated specifically to protect small business owners on Dunbar Street from displacement. Lease stabilization, remediation assistance, a legal defense fund for tenants facing bad faith eviction. She paused. "Walter named you as the inaugural trustee, Salmont." The diner moved around them. A couple at the counter. The waitress refilling coffees. A truck pulling off Route 9 into the gravel lot outside. All of it ordinary. All of it completely separate from what was happening in this booth. "He'd never met me," Diana said. "He met you 11 days ago on a dark road," Evelyn said. "And apparently that was enough." Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. "He called me when he got home that night. It was past 9:30, and I'd been worried sick. And the first thing he said wasn't an apology for being late. He said, 'Evelyn, I met someone tonight who reminded me of what we were supposed to be doing.'" Diana was quiet for a moment. "He knew my name," she said. "When Langley came to my shop, he knew my name before I said it. Walter asked his night nurse to find you," Evelyn said. "He gave her your first name and the description of your car. It didn't take long." She paused. "I want you to understand something, Ms. Cole. My husband was not a perfect man. He made money in ways that cost other people, and he told himself the math worked out. But in those last weeks, he was trying. Genuinely trying. The trust was real. The intent was real." Diana looked at the letter again. The careful handwriting. The specific phrase. "She'll know what honest looks like." She thought about Damon removed from a scholarship by a board his grandfather had just moved to correct. She thought about 11 violations recorded in her building by a man whose father had spent his final weeks trying to protect buildings like hers. Elsie. She thought about the name on the gate, the name on her lease, the name that connected all of it. Preston is going to contest it, Diana said. Yes, Evelyn said. He already has an attorney preparing. He'll argue diminished capacity. He'll argue undue influence. Her voice was steady. He'll lose. Walter was meticulous. There's documentation. Video testimony he recorded himself. The private attorney has everything. Then why do you need me? Evelyn looked at her directly. Because a trust needs a trustee willing to stand publicly, to be named, to face what Preston will do when he realizes he can't stop it legally and decides to try other methods. She folded her hands on the table. I watched what happened with your building this week. The inspection, the lease. I know about Damon's scholarship. Diana went very still. I know, Evelyn said quietly. And I'm sorry. That was Preston acting alone, and it was wrong, and I cannot undo it. But I can tell you that the woman my husband described, the woman who changed a tire in the dark and refused payment and followed an old man home to make sure he was safe, I believe that woman can handle what comes next. Diana drove home in complete silence. When she turned onto Dunbar Street, she saw it immediately. A notice taped to the laundromat door. White paper. Bold type. Notice of eviction. Vacate within 30 days. Preston had moved up the timeline. Diana parked the car. She sat for a moment. Then she got out, walked to the door, peeled the notice off carefully, folded it once, and put it in her bag. She unlocked the laundromat and went inside. Diana did not panic. That was the thing people would remark on later. Not the legal strategy, not the documents, not the timeline. The thing people would remember was that Diana Cole received an eviction notice on a Wednesday morning, folded it into her bag, walked into her laundromat, and opened for business at 6:30 the next day, exactly as she always had. She called Keisha that evening. Then she called Aunt Vera. Then she asked Aunt Vera about the attorney, the one Vera had mentioned once, 2 years ago, during a different kind of trouble on Dunbar Street. Gloria Tate, Aunt Vera said immediately. She's on Clement Street. She doesn't advertise. You have to know to call her. Diana called her at 8:15 that evening. Gloria Tate picked up on the third ring, listened without interrupting for 4 minutes, and said, Bring everything. Tomorrow at noon. Gloria Tate was 53 years old, narrow-shouldered, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. Her office was 2 rooms above a tax preparation service on Clement Street, and it was filled floor to ceiling with files organized in a system that looked chaotic and was apparently perfect. She had spent 22 years doing tenant rights work in Harwick County. She had seen most things. She had not, she admitted, seen quite this particular configuration before. She read through everything Diana brought. The lease, the violations list, the eviction notice, the timeline, the notes from the meeting with Evelyn, a copy of the letter Walter had written. Then she put her glasses down and looked at Diana. The eviction notice has procedural problems, she said. The 30-day timeline doesn't comply with Georgia commercial tenancy law for a lease of this duration. That buys us time. She picked up the violations list. 11 items generated in a single visit with no prior written notice of inspection. That's retaliatory on its face, especially given the timing relative to you declining their offer. She set it down. The trust complicates everything for Preston. Once it enters probate, his leverage over your building weakens considerably because the underlying property strategy depends on a clean acquisition of that block. A public legal fight draws attention he doesn't want. He'll fight the will, Diana said. He'll try, Gloria said. But Evelyn says there's documentation and video testimony. That's what she told me. Gloria nodded slowly. Then let him fight it. Filed injunctions, contested wills, retaliatory eviction claims. All of that becomes public record. Preston Gaines is not a man who wants public record. That evening, Diana sat at the kitchen table with Damon. She told him everything. Not the edited version, not the version calibrated to protect him from weight he was already carrying. The full version. Walter. The trust. Evelyn. Gloria. What was coming? Damon listened the way he always listened. Completely still. Eyes on his mother, not interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Mom," he said, "are you scared?" Diana looked at her son. His face was 16 years old and already contained something older. A readiness, a steadiness, that she recognized because she had watched it grow in him since the year his father died, and he had quietly, without announcement, decided to become someone she could lean on. "Every single day," she said. "But scared and stopped are two different things." Damon nodded. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers for just a moment. Then he went back to his homework. Gloria filed the emergency injunction the next morning. The retaliatory eviction claim went in simultaneously. By afternoon, Preston's attorney had been served. Preston arrived at the laundromat at 2 o'clock. He did not bring his portfolio this time. He came alone, and he came without the careful performance of pleasantness he usually maintained. He pushed the door open and walked to the counter and looked at Diana with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not contempt, not amusement, but something rawer and less managed. "You think you can fight this?" he said. It was not quite a question. The laundromat had 3 customers. None of them pretended not to be listening. Diana looked at him evenly. "I'm not fighting anything, Preston. I'm just staying. My family has been in this county for 100 years. His voice had an edge in it now, something pressed and tight. We built half of what's standing on this street. You don't get to. Your father was in this county too," Diana said. The sentence was quiet, completely quiet, delivered without heat or theater. Preston stopped. "And he wasn't anything like you," Diana said. The room was absolutely still. One of the customers, an older man named Gerald who came every Wednesday with his repurposed juice bottle of detergent, looked up from his magazine and looked at Preston Gaines with an expression of calm and total assessment. Preston's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes. Not shame, not quite, but the nearest thing to it that a man like Preston Gaines could produce. He left without another word. Gloria called that evening. Her voice had a quality Diana had not heard in it before. A controlled excitement. The tone of someone holding good news carefully. "Diana," she said, "I've seen the full contents of the will." And a pause. Not hesitation, but the pause of someone making sure they had the right words for what they were about to say. "You need to sit down," Gloria said. Diana sat down. The will was 41 pages. Gloria walked Diana through it the next morning, section by section, at the small table in the 2-room office on Clement Street. Outside, Harwick was doing its ordinary morning things. Traffic on the main road, a school bus making its stops, the smell of someone's breakfast drifting up from the street. None of it felt real against what was being read aloud in that room. The Gaines Community Preservation Fund. $4.2 million. Formally and irrevocably endowed. Designated for the protection, stabilization, and legal defense of small business tenants on Dunbar Street and the surrounding blocks in Harwick, Georgia. Lease stabilization mechanisms. A remediation assistance fund for legitimate code violations. A legal defense reserve for tenants facing bad faith eviction proceedings. And Diana Cole, named by full legal name, as inaugural trustee. Not a beneficiary, a steward. The distinction mattered. Walter had been precise about it. The money was not for Diana. The money was for Dunbar Street, administered by Diana, because Walter Gaines had decided in the last weeks of his life that Diana Cole was the kind of person who could be trusted with something that wasn't hers. He also left a video, Gloria said. She turned her laptop screen toward Diana. Walter Gaines sat in the wingback chair in what appeared to be a home library. Bookshelves behind him, afternoon light through a window to his left. He was dressed carefully. His hands were folded in his lap. He looked directly at the camera with the clear, deliberate gaze of a man who had decided exactly what he wanted to say and was going to say it without ornamentation. My name is Walter Gaines. I am recording this statement on the 14th of this month in full possession of my faculties, as my attorney can confirm. I want to speak plainly about my intentions and my reasoning, because I expect they will be questioned. He paused. I built things in this county. I am not ashamed of that. But I also permitted things to happen under the name of this family that I should have stopped. The way Dunbar Street has been managed in recent years, the pressure applied to long-standing tenants, the manufactured violations, the systematic effort to displace people who have given decades of their lives to that community, I knew. I did not stop it soon enough. That is my failure, and I own it. His voice was steady. His eyes did not move from the camera. The trust I am establishing is my attempt to correct what I can still correct. It is not absolution. It is just the right thing to do, done late. He unfolded his hands. I have named Diana Cole as trustee because I met her once, briefly, and in that brief meeting she showed me more integrity than I have seen in a great many longer acquaintances. She didn't know who I was. She helped me anyway. She refused payment. She made sure I got home safely. These are small things, but small things are how you know. The video ended. Diana sat looking at the screen for a moment after it went dark. Preston's attorney filed the capacity challenge yesterday afternoon, Gloria said. They're arguing diminished mental state and undue influence, the undue influence being you, for what it's worth. Of course, Diana said. It won't hold, Gloria said. The private attorney documented everything. Cognitive assessment conducted 3 weeks before Walter's death. Completely normal for his age. 2 independent witnesses to the signing. The video itself. She closed the laptop. But it will generate attention. A contested will in the Gaines family. That's a story. The local paper already has something. There's a journalist named Patricia Owens at the Harwick Courier who covers development issues. She called me this morning. What did you tell her? That my client had no comment at this time. Gloria looked at Diana. But Diana, the story is going to come out regardless. The only question is whether you shape it or whether Preston does. Diana thought about that. Let it come out, she said. The story ran 3 days later. Patricia Owens was thorough and careful. She had clearly been watching the Dunbar Street development situation for some time and had more context than Diana had expected. The headline was straightforward. Billionaire's final act, a tire change, a trust fund, and a fight for Dunbar Street. The story covered Walter's will, the trust, Diana's role, and the contested capacity challenge. It covered the eviction notice, the violations list, the timing. It covered the Gaines Property Group's development proposal and the 7 buildings acquired on Dunbar Street. It covered Damon's scholarship removal from a foundation board that Preston sat on, noting the timing relative to Diana's refusal of the reward offer. Patricia Owens had done her job. The story was picked up by the regional wire service by that evening. By the following morning, it had traveled. Preston's attorney issued a statement. It used words like deeply concerned and protecting the family's legacy and questions about the circumstances. It was the statement of a legal team that had looked at the landscape and understood they were losing the terrain. The capacity challenge went before a probate judge 9 days later. Gloria stood at the plaintiff's table and was precise and unhurried. Preston's attorney was louder and less organized. The private attorney presented the documentation, the cognitive assessment, the witness statements. Then he submitted the video into evidence. Walter Gaines spoke to the courtroom from a laptop screen, clear-eyed and deliberate, and entirely himself. When it ended, the room was very quiet. The judge did not take long. The capacity challenge was denied. The trust was validated. The eviction proceedings were formally dismissed as retaliatory under Georgia Commercial Tenancy Statute. Diana was in the courthouse hallway when Preston emerged from the courtroom. His attorney was beside him, speaking quietly. Preston was not listening. He was standing very still, portfolio absent for once, both hands at his sides, his face the color of old ash. Diana walked toward him on her way to the exit. She did not slow down. She did not speak. She did not look at him with triumph or anger or anything that would give him a role in how she felt. She simply walked past him. Outside, Damon was waiting on the courthouse steps, backpack on, hands in his jacket pockets. When he saw his mother come through the doors, he stood up straight. She walked down the steps, and he wrapped his arms around her without a word. Over his shoulder, she saw the black SUV parked at the curb. Arthur Langley stepped out, straightened his jacket, looked at Diana for a moment, and nodded once. A small, final gesture. Then he got back in and drove away. The trust became active on a Thursday. Gloria handled the formal paperwork. Diana signed her name in 3 places as trustee, using the same pen she kept behind the counter at Kohl's Wash and Fold. A blue ballpoint she'd bought in a 10-pack from the dollar store, the kind she replaced when the ink ran out without thinking about it. It was not a ceremonial pen. That felt right. The first action of the Gaines Community Preservation Fund was straightforward. Lease stabilization agreements for all 7 small business tenants on the affected Dunbar Street block, fixing rents at current rates for a minimum of 5 years, with structured, capped adjustment terms. The agreements were prepared by Gloria's office and executed within the first 2 weeks. Miss Patrice at the hair salon signed hers on a Friday afternoon and cried quietly at her own front desk. Ray at the alterations shop read his twice, very carefully, then shook Diana's hand with both of his and didn't say anything, because Ray was not a man who said things when the feeling was large enough. The second action, a remediation fund disbursement to Kohl's Wash and Fold for documented repair needs. The industrial dryer in the back, the one that had been grinding for 4 months. The one Diana had been adding to her mental list and deferring, was repaired on a Tuesday morning by a technician named Earl, who had the part on his truck and finished in under 2 hours. Diana stood in the doorway of the back room and watched the machine run a full cycle in silence. No grinding, just the low, clean hum of something working the way it was supposed to work. She allowed herself that moment. Just that moment. Then she went back to the counter. The third action came from a direction Diana hadn't anticipated. The business owners on Dunbar Street, 7 of them, the full block, held an informal meeting at the Caribbean restaurant one evening. The kind of meeting where someone brings extra chairs from the back and someone else brings food, and nobody has an agenda written down, but everyone knows why they're there. They talked for 2 hours. At the end of it, they had established a small collective fund, each business contributing what they could, nothing required, nothing pressured. The stated purpose: a community scholarship awarded annually to a Harwick student demonstrating academic merit and financial need. The first recipient, selected that spring, was Damon Cole. The amount was not the full 2 years that the Gaines Family Foundation scholarship would have provided. It was less, but it was clean. It came from people who knew his mother, who had watched him do homework at the folding table in the back of her laundromat for years, who had decided without being asked that this was the right thing to do. Damon received the notification by email on a Wednesday afternoon. He was at school. He read it in the hallway between classes and then stood very still for a moment and then walked to his next class and didn't say anything to anyone until he got home. He walked into the laundromat, set his backpack on the folding table, and handed his mother his phone with the email open on the screen. Diana read it. She read it again. Then she put the phone down and put her arms around her son and held on for a long time, right there behind the counter, while the machines ran their cycles and the afternoon light came through the front window and lay warm and flat across the floor. Evelyn Gaines came to Dunbar Street once, in early spring. She didn't announce it. She simply appeared one morning, pale blue cardigan, white hair, walking slowly with a cane Diana hadn't seen at the diner, and stood outside Cole's Wash and Fold for a moment, looking at the sign. The hand-painted sign, white letters on blue, the ampersand slightly too large. Diana saw her through the window and went out. They stood together on the sidewalk for a moment without speaking. He would have liked this street, Evelyn said finally. The real version of it, not what Preston was trying to make it. Diana nodded. He planted a tree once, Evelyn said, almost to herself. When our first son was born, he planted a tree in the yard. He said, "Things that grow slowly last the longest." She looked at Diana. "I thought you should know that about him. Not the buildings, not the money, that." Diana looked at the older woman, her careful posture, her tired eyes, the grief she carried without display, and felt something that was not forgiveness exactly, because forgiveness wasn't hers to give for wrongs done to others, but something adjacent, something that allowed for the complexity of a man who had done harm and had tried, at the end, to do better. "Thank you for finding me," Diana said. Evelyn nodded once. Then she walked back to her car. In the fall, the Gaines Community Preservation Fund planted 7 trees along the Dunbar Street sidewalk, one for each protected business. They were young trees, thin-trunked, staked carefully against the wind. They would take years to provide shade. At the base of the tree, in front of Cole's Wash and Fold, a small bronze marker was set into the concrete. It read, "In memory of Walter Gaines, who tried to do right at the end." Diana saw it the morning it was installed. She stood in front of it for a moment, hands in her apron pockets, the early morning quiet around her. Then she unlocked the laundromat, turned on the machines, left to right, counted the coin drawer, set out the detergent. She opened at 6:30, same as always. That Tuesday evening, after closing, she drove home on Route 7, mile marker 12, the long curve where the tree line opened up. She saw hazard lights on the shoulder. She didn't hesitate. She didn't slow down to think about it, or weigh the hour, or consider what it might cost her. She pulled over. Because that was who she was. That had always been who she was. And no one, not a rent increase, not an eviction notice, not a man in a suit who dropped money on her counter like a verdict, had ever managed to change that. Diana Cole never set out to change anything. She just stopped on a dark road because someone needed help. That's it. That's the whole origin of everything that followed. And maybe that's the point. That the most consequential things we do rarely feel consequential when we do them. They feel ordinary. They feel like the only decent option. The world will always have people who believe that power is something you take from others. But there will also always be people like Diana, who understand that real strength is something you quietly, stubbornly, impossibly refuse to give away. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment and tell me what part hit hardest. And if you believe that quiet dignity deserves to be seen, subscribe. There are more stories like this one. They deserve to be told.